Today's day 3 for the Come Follow Me study for this week, August 3rd through the 9th. Thou art come for such a time as this. Esther. Wednesday, August 5th, 2026, Esther 5 through 6. Esther 5. The king receives Esther. Mary Ellen Smoot said, spiritually prepared, Esther approached the king. Barbara B. Smith said, with every step she must have wondered, will he hold out the royal scepter? Will he condemn me to death? Will he drop me into poverty and oblivion? She stood before him, young, beautiful, calm, knowing that she was totally vulnerable. She also knew that she had appealed to God for help, and that there was a great moral wrong about to be committed. She had to be responsible to God, who made her, no matter what the moral consequences. Each person in today's world has responsibilities akin to those which Esther faced. The circumstances of each life are significantly different, yet each person faces the challenge of being true to the principles of the gospel, if they would improve the quality of their mortal life and make themselves worthy of the opportunity of eternal progression. They should begin by understanding who they are and that they have a magnificent potential as a child of God. Their goal, then, should be lofty. Esther 5:1. Now it came to pass on the third day that Esther put on her royal apparel and stood in the inner court of the king's house, over against the king's house, and the king sat upon his royal throne in the royal house, over against the gate of the house.
Placing him above thy esteemed majesty and power. The enlightenment joy through.
Esther 5:2-3. And it was so, when the king saw Esther the queen standing in the court, that she obtained favor in his sight. And the king held out to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand. So Esther drew near and touched the top of the scepter. Then said the king unto her, What wilt thou, Queen Esther, and what is thy request? It shall be given thee to the half of the kingdom. Esther invites him and Haman to a banquet. Esther 5:4. And Esther answered, If it seem good unto the king, let the king and Haman come this day unto the banquet that I have prepared for him. Note the different consequences Mordecai and Esther experienced after showing courage. What did Esther and Mordecai need to know about God to make the choices they made? Think of situations where you need courage to stand up for what's right. What do you learn from Esther and Mordecai that can help you find courage in the Lord? Esther 5:5-8. Then the king said, Cause Haman to make haste, that he may do as Esther hath said. So the king and Haman came to the banquet that Esther had prepared. And the king said unto Esther at the banquet of wine, What is thy petition? And it shall be granted thee. And what is thy request? Even to the half of the kingdom it shall be performed. Then answered Esther and said, My petition and my request is, if I have found favor in the sight of the king, and if it please the king to grant my petition and to perform my request, let the king and Haman come to the banquet that I shall prepare for them, and I will do tomorrow as the king has said. Esther seized advantage in her first favorable reception to enhance her good standing with the king and to bring about a strategic announcement of her request. But the first delay was not enough. She offered a second banquet the next night. What happened in those 24 hours was of the greatest importance. The sudden desire of the king to read the records was obviously inspired from the Lord. The fasting and faithfulness of Esther and her people was productive and brought the Lord into the situation. With Haman's powerful position and favor in the eyes of the king, a direct accusation by Esther might well have been rejected had the king not been prepared beforehand. Haman plans to have Mordecai hanged. Esther 5:9-13. Then went Haman forth that day joyful and with a glad heart. But when Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gate, that he stood not up, nor moved for him, he was full of indignation against Mordecai. Nevertheless Haman refrained himself, and when he came home, he sent and called for his friends, and Zeresh his wife. And Haman told them of the glory of his riches, and the multitude of his children, and all the things wherein the king had promoted him, and how he had advanced him above the princes and servants of the king. Haman said moreover, Yea, Esther the queen did let no man come in with the king unto the banquet that she had prepared but myself, and tomorrow am I invited unto her also with the king. Yet all this availeth me nothing, so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. What do Haman's feelings, words, and actions reveal about him and his motivations? Esther 5:14. Then said Zeresh his wife and all his friends unto him, Let a gallows be made of 50 cubits high, and tomorrow speak thou unto the king that Mordecai may be hanged thereon. Then go thou in merrily with the king unto the banquet. And the thing pleased Haman, and he caused the gallows to be made. The gallows was probably not an elevated gallows, but rather a high pole or stake from which Mordecai could be hanged. 50 cubits would be about 75 feet high. The higher the stake, the farther it could be seen. Haman's intent seems to have been to make a real example of Mordecai. Esther 6. Mordecai receives great honors. Esther 6:1. On that night could not the king sleep, and he commanded to bring the book of records of the chronicles, and they were read before the king. The book from which the king's servants read was an official record of events in the Persian Empire. This record is also mentioned elsewhere in Esther and in Ezra. It is implied that the Lord's influence led the king to read this particular part of the record, prompting him to remember Mordecai's heroic act from a few years prior. Esther 6:2-11. And it was found written that Mordecai had told of Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's chamberlains, the keepers of the door, who sought to lay hand on the king Ahasuerus. And the king said, What honor and dignity hath been done to Mordecai for this? Then said the king's servants that ministered unto him, There is nothing done for him. And the king said, Who is in the court? Now Haman was come into the outward court of the king's house, to speak unto the king, to hang Mordecai on the gallows that he had prepared for him. And the king's servants said unto him, Behold, Haman standeth in the court. And the king said, Let him come in. So Haman came in, and the king said unto him, What shall be done unto the man whom the king delighteth to honor? Now Haman thought in his heart, To whom would the king delight to do honor more than to myself? And Haman answered the king, For the man whom the king delighteth to honor, let the royal apparel be brought which the king useth to wear, and the horse that the king rideth upon, and the crown royal which is set upon his head. And let this apparel and horse be delivered to the hand of one of the king's most noble princes, that they may array the man withal whom the king delighteth to honor, and bring him on horseback through the street of the city, and proclaim before him, Thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delighteth to honor. Then the king said to Haman, Make haste, and take the apparel and the horse, as thou hast said, and do even so to Mordecai the Jew, that sitteth at the king's gate. Let nothing fail of all that thou hast spoken. Then took Haman the apparel and the horse, and arrayed Mordecai, and brought him on horseback through the street of the city, and proclaimed before him, Thus shall it be done unto the man whom the king delighteth to honor. Haman mourns and is counseled by his wife. Esther 6:12-14. And Mordecai came again to the king's gate, but Haman hasted to his house mourning, and having his head covered. And Haman told Zeresh his wife and all his friends everything that had befallen him. Then said his wise men and Zeresh his wife unto him, If Mordecai be of the seed of the Jews, before whom thou hast begun to fall. Thou shalt not prevail against him, but shalt surely fall before him. And while they were yet talking with him, came the king's chamberlains, and hasted to bring Haman unto the banquet that Esther had prepared. It was ironic that at that particular time the king availed himself of the services of Haman to gain from him a suggestion as to how to honor a certain deserving man. Haman didn't know it was Mordecai for whom he was suggesting honors at the very time he had come to get permission to hang Mordecai. And thus it was that Haman had the frustration and humiliation of doing for Mordecai what Haman had hoped was to be done for himself. Moreover, he had no opportunity to do what he had planned to do to Mordecai. Note that Haman's own wife had ominously predicted dire fate would befall him if his opponent be of the seed of the Jews.